Be part of the peace movement. Share this episode using hashtag the Great Disarmament and download the free peace resource guide at aviskalfsbeck.com/peace guide. The Great Disarmament, The Great Disfarmament, Part 12, Arms and Arguments. Hi, I'm Avis Kalfsbeck, author, podcast host, and peace storyteller. This is The Great Disarmament, The Great Disfarmament, a special series tracing how we learn to kill and how we might stop. Each episode revisits a moment in history when the momentum of militarization was met with something else, resistance, remembrance, imagination. This one's called Arms and Arguments. It's the 1980s. Hair is big. Missiles are bigger. The Cold War enters a fever pitch. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in an arms race so vast it threatens all life on Earth. Warheads multiply. Budgets explode. The policy of mutual assured destruction becomes doctrine. But a shift begins, unexpected and powerful. For the first time in history, the conversation around nuclear weapons becomes public, loudly, creatively, and globally public. Average people begin reading treaties, watching televised debates, filling auditoriums, writing op-eds, organizing protests. The arguments about disarmament, once confined to elite back rooms, spill into dinner tables, classrooms, churches, laboratories, and the streets. If peace had a golden age, it wasn't this one. The Cold War was roaring. President Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union an evil empire. Defense budgets soared. Nuclear weapons regained cultural and political currency. The U.S. invested heavily in new programs like the Strategic Defense Initiative, dubbed Star Wars, which promised missile shields from space. But here's the twist. The peace movement didn't vanish. It got louder, smarter, more diverse. And perhaps most surprisingly, it got televised. This was the peak of the nuclear stockpiling era, both in volume and in psychological weight. Tens of thousands of warheads stood ready for launch, enough to destroy the world many times over. Weapons were fitted with MIRVs, multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, making each missile capable of annihilating several cities. Mobile launchers, stealth bombers, and biological stockpiles expanded global threat vectors. Military budgets in the U.S., USSR, and other powers grew to absorb this doctrine of escalation. The logic was chillingly simple. If we stop arming, they'll win. But the world was no longer resigned to that logic. Informed and increasingly skeptical, people began to respond with intellect, conviction, and persistence. In the face of overwhelming military might, ordinary citizens found their voices and microphones. In the U.S., the nuclear freeze movement gained national traction, backed by scientists, clergy, celebrities, and millions of citizens. Across Europe, new green political parties made disarmament central to their platforms, linking peace with environmental stewardship. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's policies on glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, opened long-shut doors to public discourse and diplomacy. Women's peace movements surged, like the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp in England, where women lived for years outside a U.S. missile base, singing, marching, and refusing to look away. Treaties followed, not perfectly, not universally, but meaningfully. In 1987, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty eliminated an entire category of nuclear weapons. In 1991, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, known as START I, became the most extensive bilateral disarmament agreement in history. And between 1989 and 1991, the Berlin Wall fell. The Soviet Union dissolved. The world held its breath. Some called it victory, but peace builders understood it differently, not an ending, but a fragile opening, a window, narrow, precious, and uncertain. Today's voice belongs to Howard Zinn, historian, teacher, veteran, and author of A People's History of the United States. Zinn rejected the sanitized retelling of history as a parade of generals and presidents. He urged us to listen instead to those who resisted, those who organized, those who said no. He wrote, "There is no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people." For Zinn, patriotism was not obedience, it was responsibility. The act of questioning power was not to tear down society, but to build something more just. In a time of fiery rhetoric and political theater, he reminded us that the truest measure of a nation is how bravely its people speak for peace. What it means for us. You may be thinking, I thought you said 1963 started the Great Disarmament. You're right. 1963 was the beginning, but not like a light switch, more like a fuse, slow burning, flickering, sometimes nearly snuffed out. This period, the 1980s through the early 2000s, offers a complex, sometimes contradictory lesson. It's easy to romanticize the fall of the Berlin Wall or the handshake over a treaty table, but disarmament has never been simple or fast or linear. Weapons didn't disappear overnight, and militarized thinking didn't dissolve with a pen stroke. What did happen was something quieter and arguably more lasting. We learned how to argue, how to challenge militarism without being called traitors, how to ask, what is security? Who gets to define it? And at what cost? We learn that disarmament isn't magic, it's process, sometimes painstaking, often political, always fragile. But it happens, not all at once, but in steps, a treaty, a protest, a refusal. Peace, we began to see, is not passive. It is learned, defended, and practiced. From the page to the soil. James Baldwin's 1963 classic is often read as a book about race, but it is equally a book about fear and how fear corrodes a society's soul. Baldwin writes, I know what I'm asking is impossible, but in our time, as in every time, the impossible is the least that one can demand. He wasn't speaking of disarmament, but his words land here too. The fear that fueled racism, poverty, and violence in Baldwin's America is the same fear that drives militarism, the illusion that safety can be built on the suffering of others. In this era, peace movements weren't asking for miracles. They were demanding the impossible because the alternative was unthinkable. Baldwin's fire was not just rage, it was clarity. And the peace argument, at its best, shares that clarity, sharp, patient, and unwilling to accept a future built on fear. In our next episode, we plant something gentler and maybe braver. Seeds of Peace is the final chapter of this arc. I hope you'll join me. I'll see you there. That wraps up this episode of Peace is Here. Will you please take a moment to subscribe and share it with a friend? Subscribing helps others discover peaceful, independent storytelling, and it means a lot to me. I'm Avis Kaufsbeck, author of the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet series, eco-adventure novellas for readers who care about environmental justice, joy, and saving the world one story at a time. You can learn more at aviskaufsbeck.com. Book 6, Mono Mutante, is now available at all major online retailers, or if you'd like to support my book directly, you can get the ebook at aviskaufsbeck.com/mono-mutante. It's a wild satirical ride through food, farming, and the messiness of recovery. When you subscribe to my list, you'll also be the first to hear about my next book, Bulletproof, which asks, what in the world are we going to do about guns? A link to subscribe is in the show notes. From October 18th to November 8th, 2025, I'm running a live Kickstarter campaign. I'd be so grateful if you'd visit avaskalfsbeck.com/Kickstarter to get notified. I'm creating a companion field journal for Book 1, One More Year, called Peace Stuff Primer, along with a stage play version of the book. I can't wait to share it with you. This episode was human narrated by me with the help of AI, which has promised to let me know if it ever makes something up. So far, no confessions, but if you think I've missed something or if you just want to say hello, I'd love to hear from you. Podcast music is by Javier Peke Rodriguez. You'll find links to his music on Spotify and Bandcamp in the show notes. I'm Avis Kalfsbeck. Thank you again. Until next time, listen for the peace.